So X-Men Apocalypse comes out this week, and judging from early internet reaction, things are looking kind of mixed with this one. It's already opened overseas and is currently outpacing Days of Future Past in terms of box office, which is really good. But as of this recording, it currently has a 51 on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty low. Especially when you consider that the last 3 X-Men movies have been really well received, this is kind of a shame. In fact, if we're just going off of Rotten Tomatoes scores, Apocalypse currently sits below X-Men 3 The Last Stand and above X-Men Origins Wolverine, the 2 least revered movies in the series. And that's not really a good place to be. I mean, X-Men Origins Wolverine is bad. It's straight up bad. It's got bad acting, bad characters, bad dialogue, a bad story, bad directing, just bad everything. And X-Men 3, to be honest, I like X-Men 3. Now, before you all jump to the comments, let me just make it clear, I don't think this is the best X-Men movie. That would be First Class. Nor do I think this is a great film overall. It has a lot of issues that I will touch upon. What I do think, and what I'm going to try to argue here today, is that there's a lot of good stuff in this film, and I don't think it deserves all the hatred that it gets. But let's start with the bad, because I'm not going to pretend that this movie doesn't have flaws. It certainly does. Chief among them being the way they handle Jean Grey and the Phoenix story. Now, try to understand that back in 2003, when X-Men 2 came out, the final image of the film with the Firebird flying across Alkali Lake caused fans around the world to lose their mind. Finally, what's considered to be the greatest X-Men story of all time is going to be shown on the big screen, and by a team that has already proven they know what they're doing with this franchise. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Bryan Singer left the X-Men series, and the Phoenix Saga became the B story in X-Men The Last Stand. And that just sucks. The Dark Phoenix Saga is one of the most well-loved X-Men stories of all time for a reason. It's deep and full of a lot of emotion. You can't just make that the subplot of a movie because you feel obligated to put it in there. And I think a lot of people get hung up on this issue, but rightfully so. They botched the Phoenix story, and it negatively affected the main story of the movie, which was the fight against the mutant cure. Which is a shame because that story is really good. Now, the first 2 X-Men movies put a greater focus on the diversity and social rights angle of the franchise over the more outlandish stuff that would come to define later X-Men comics. Now, the idea of the mutant cure is a logical continuation of that angle and is probably an ultimate conclusion of that particular storyline. I mean, humans have made a cure for being a mutant. How will mutants handle this? You have somebody like Rogue who's struggling with whether or not to take it. You have somebody like Magneto who considers this the ultimate act of war. Speaking of which, this is probably the best Ian McKellen has ever been as Magneto. Here he's not only a full-blown villain again, but he's a villain with a motivation that not only makes sense but is completely justified. And McKellen just sells the hell out of it. His line about Xavier doing more for mutants than anybody will ever know is definitely the best line in the movie.
Charles Xavier did more for mutants than you'll ever know. My single greatest regret is that he had to die for our dream to live.
In only 2 sentences, he's able to describe his relationship with Professor X, one full of disagreements, but ultimately respect and friendship. His hatred of humans is so deep in this film that when Mystique loses her powers, he just abandons her. It's so cold and you feel so bad for her. She sacrificed herself for him and he just lets her go. It's dark stuff. Which, when he ultimately loses his powers at the end of the film, makes it one of the most oddly satisfying conclusions in the series. And it's not just Magneto who's stellar here. Hugh Jackman is of course excellent as Wolverine. He doesn't really have an arc in this movie, but let's be real. Wolverine is a character that doesn't need an arc all the time. Kelsey Grammer is the perfect beast. No questions asked. I'm sorry, Nicholas Hoult, you're good, but you're not Frazier. And Rogue's internal conflict over whether or not to take the cure is just great. Her conclusion at the end of this movie is one of the film's best moments. It could have been easy to just cop out and not have her take the cure and perpetuate the whole "this is me, I am who I am" mentality that the franchise is known for, but they didn't do that. Instead, she takes the cure, and it's what she wanted. It may seem like she did it for Iceman, but really she did it for herself. And if you knew her character throughout the series, you'd see that makes sense. Now again, it's not perfect. The Cure story was told better in the pages of Astonishing X-Men, and because they had to also tell the Phoenix story, a lot of parts of the Cure story got cut for time it really needed. I feel like there was a great story in the Iceman-Pyro conflict that unfortunately got pushed to the side. New characters like Angel and Juggernaut really weren't given the amount of time they honestly deserved. But honestly, at the end of the day, I feel like the conflict with the Cure is such a strong story that it outweighs any negatives I have for this movie. It's really just that good. Now, I know a lot of people blame director Brett Ratner for how the film turned out, but honestly, I don't think that's fair. Nor do I necessarily think it's fair to blame writers Simon Kinberg and Zach Penn. Fox needed this movie to come out in 2006 for some reason, and they were not willing to wait for Bryan Singer to return from making Superman stare at Lois Lane through a window for 2.5 hours. So there really wasn't enough time for the filmmakers to do everything they wanted to do. To make matters worse, Fox wanted the Cure story, but the writers wanted the Phoenix story. They compromised and did both, but in the end, maybe they should have just listened to the studio for once. It was the better of the two stories. I'll never say this is a great film, and I understand why people don't like it, but if you ask me, it could have been a lot worse. What we got is still pretty good, and it moves at a fast enough pace that it never feels like a boring slog. All in all, this is a solid C movie. If you ever put it on while it's on cable, you will enjoy yourself. It is entertaining, and to be honest, it does some interesting things with the franchise. But there is that rumor that the next X-Men movie is just going to redo the Phoenix story, so maybe they'll do another movie after that that redoes the Cure story, and this whole thing was for nothing. But hey, as of now, I stand by it. X-Men 3: The Last Stand, not bad. Pretty good even. Anyway, that's just my stupid opinion. Let me know yours down below or anywhere on the internet. What do you think of X-Men The Last Stand? Do you like it? Do you hate it? What is your favorite and your least favorite X-Men movie? If your least favorite is not Wolverine, then please let me know down below. I need to know why you think a movie is worse than X-Men Origins Wolverine. Of course, new videos Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Wednesday night, Wulff Den Live, 9 p.m. Eastern. Don't forget, if you do, archive show on Thursday, or check out the audio podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play. We're everywhere. And as always, like if you like, subscribe if you really like, share this video with a friend. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Let's start off by going over the 2014 Ninja Turtles movie, shall we? Now, this film was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. It's still bad, but it's not the worst piece of crap I've ever seen in my life. Van Helsing still holds that title. But the most important thing the Spirit series did was it introduced me to a creator who knew exactly what he was doing, who knew what his strengths and weaknesses were and how to cater to both of them perfectly. After that, I took the plunge. I went back and read New Frontier and loved every second of it. But then I read Parker.